Welcome to Plastic Model Mojo, a podcast dedicated to scale modeling, as well as the news and events around the hobby, where we hope to be informative and entertaining and help you keep your modeling mojo alive. We are back once again, and it's time for episode 66 of Plastic Model Mojo. And if it was any hotter than bluegrass, it would be 666.
Ain't that the truth?
We'd be in hell, I think. So for Kentucky, it's pretty stinking hot. I mean, we're flirting with 100 here.
We're going to get 99 tomorrow. We're getting 5 or 6 straight days of high 90s. It's going to be warm.
Well, what have you been doing in your model sphere?
Well, you know what? My model sphere's great, but it struck me a little bit how weird my modeling life is. Last Thursday, was it Wednesday or Thursday? At 7 a.m, I am DMing with Dave Goldfinch, and we're showing each other our big missiles. Wait a minute. That didn't sound right. He's building a Mercury Atlas from Horizon, and I'm building that SS2 from Bronco. And we started DMing back and forth and showing pictures of where the progress was on the models. Then during the day while I'm working, I'm responding to one of our listeners, and I'll talk about later about, just a modeling question. And then that night at 11:30, I'm on the phone with John Bonani talking about IPMS USA business. So, my model sphere, if you had told me that would be part of my modeling life 10 or 15 years ago, I'd have told you you're crazy. But it's, technology has a lot of downsides, but man, I got to say, there's a lot of upside to be able to talk to somebody in Australia at 7 o'clock in the morning here, 9:30 at night there, answering questions for modeling during the day while you're working from home. And then, late at night while you're at the bench, wrapping up some IPMS USA stuff. It's pretty great. And I cannot complain, I got to say. How about you?
Well, I think you're going to have to figure out how to find a floating workbench.
Yeah, I'm telling you what, that's probably true. The next few days, at least, either I'm inside or I'm going to be in the pool with that kind of temperature.
Oh, yeah. Pretty hot.
So what's up in your model sphere?
Oh, I tell you, I've been enjoying this little bit of banter back with Evan McCallum, Mr. Panzermeister 36. One of us said, I guess it was in our last episode or one before that, maybe that there were 9 3D printed track companies at present.
Yep.
And we got a message a few days ago where Evan quit back. There was actually 10. Well, I promptly replied that there were probably 11 since he sent that message moments earlier. Well, now he comes back and he says there's really like 13 at present, I think, something like that. He just let us know that he's made good on his promise for a review video. Listeners can expect the first installment of that. I mean, there's so many track options now that he's going to break this up into at least 2 parts for now, probably expanding on it later, maybe, because unless he just throws in the towel, I don't know what he's going to do. He can only tread water for so long. But this new video drops Saturday, which should be the day after this episode drops. So please head on over to Panzermeister 36 YouTube channel and learn all about 3D printed tracks. I'm anxious. I haven't watched it yet. He sent us a little preview option, and we'll have to check that out.
Yeah, he sent us a preview. I did watch it. I'm pretty sure by the time I was done watching it, there would probably been another company that announced they were getting into it. It's a really well done video. And as Mike mentioned, it's only the first half. He had to break it into at least 2 videos because there are so many companies now doing this. What he did was really, really impressive and informative. Also set him back a little money. So if you're inclined to join his Patreon, please do so, because he is clearly putting that money back into being able to do videos like this where he previews $35, $40 sets of tracks. So, Mike, I assume with this kind of heat, you've got to have a modeling fluid close at hand.
I do. It's a beer tonight. I've dipped into the Three Floyds Brewing Barbarian Haze. Now, this is the box that spoofs the Tamiya
Easy 8.
Easy 8, or it's Easy 8 box, sort of.
Yeah.
It's a nice, solid IPA. I don't know if it's my favorite IPA from Three Floyds, but it's not bad.
It is. Now, I've had that one previously, and I can assure you that you're going to have an enjoyable experience tonight.
Oh, I know I will. It's just sometimes I think I have a hops allergy to some degree.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I think sometimes these IPAs kind of make me take some allergy medicine before I go to bed. But not all of them. And I can't remember if this is one of them or not, so we'll find out.
Well, take some allergy medicine before you go.
Well, what about you, man? What are you sipping on? Oh, you got a beer, too.
I've also got a beer. And you know what? Not only do I have beer, I have beer courtesy of a listener.
Oh, yeah.
Bill Webb from Canada came down to Wonderfest and was kind enough to reach out to me on Facebook, and we arranged to meet at Wonderfest. Unfortunately, we couldn't record a podcast from Wonderfest this year due to family graduations and stuff like that, but I managed to get out to Wonderfest for a little while, and he brought me Sleeman's Cream Ale from Canada. Now, it's not a microbrew, but it's a local beer to the area. It's about 5% alcohol, and that's good. That's good. I think I'm going to enjoy this. I'll do a full report there at the end, but so far I can say, the Canadians are pretty good at beer. They really are. So I think I'm going to enjoy this tonight.
All right. Well, while you're getting into that, we need to get into the listener mail because we've got quite a bit tonight. A lot of it's some good stuff.
I know
you picked some of the Facebook messenger conversations out as well. So let's get into the mailbag, man.
You got it.
First up tonight in the mailbag is John Fincher. And John does not give me a geography, so maybe he'll let us know where he's out and about from. And this came in like right after, maybe the night we were recording, I got this one. May 31st.
The last episode.
The last episode, yeah. A couple things. You had mentioned, we were talking about in-flight models.
Yep.
And you mentioned magnetic suspension. It's kind of the next kind of way to go, maybe.
Yep.
He says that Revell used to have a series of kits called Magic Flight.
Really?
Where there's a big honking magnet in the base and some magnetic component or ferrous component you mounted in the aircraft. But this also involved a piece of monofilament wire. So,
I think I remember that.
So to keep these from zinging off the base, they were still tethered. But I think we're about to an age where, one of my coworkers has a model of the moon that's self-suspended.
Right.
And I imagine something like that might work.
Well, and I've seen at Wonderfest previously a sci-fi model, and I forget what it was, some sort of spaceship, where it literally hovered over the base. It was done with magnets. And I think we're going to see more and more of the use of magnets. I don't know if you saw, but in the last week or so, somebody announced an F-16 kit in 48 scale. And one of the features is that the pylons, the armament pylons and the weapons load will both have magnets in them, real tiny little, 1 millimeter magnets. And this will enable the modeler to change out the load on the aircraft model when he wants to.
The On the Bench guys had fun with that one in their last episode. It's Kinetic. That's who it is.
Yeah, that's Kinetic. That's right.
Ian said you can play with it now.
Well, it really would be nice. I think that's a great option. And one of the things I think it's a great option, or one of the reasons I think it's great, is that weapons are pretty universal across a country's aircraft. So instead of having to do, a new set of bombs and a new set of missiles for every aircraft model you complete, you can have one set with the magnetic attachments and swap them and move them around between aircraft.
Well, another advantage would be a lot of times those things are hanging on dodgy connection points.
Yes.
Because you've got all this painted stuff, right?
Yeah.
Unless you've been really careful to not paint certain areas. But this kind of would eliminate the need for all that kind of care.
Yep, I agree.
Well, he also mentions the Bomber Mafia, Malcolm Gladwell's book that you're reading or read now at this point. Yeah. He says it's also covered in his podcast, season 5, episode 4 through 7 from the summer of 2020, if you want to go listen to that bit about it.
Well, you'll have to put a link because I would like to. I have strong feelings on that book, and I would like to listen to a podcast on it.
And he says he mentioned that to the Seattle guys when he heard it. So maybe he did give me a geography. Maybe he is in the Seattle area.
Sounds like he's up in the Northeast.
Must be. All right. Well, thanks, John. Up next, another John, Jonathan Bryan, and he's in the UK, right? We've heard from him before.
Yep.
New Addington. He's got in this note near the RAF base, Biggin Hill base.
Gotcha.
Kind of famous.
Yes, just a little bit.
He took note of our modeling injuries installment.
Yep.
And what was he doing? He was painting some 72nd scale figures from Esky, and they're kind of like the Airfix HO00 ones. They're in the soft polyethylene crap that
that you can't make stick.
You can paint it, then you bounce it once, and half the paint flies off.
Right.
But anyway, he was using a candle to illuminate his workspace.
I see where this is going.
And he managed to set his hair on fire.
Oh.
So he went running to his parents, and says his dad beat him several times around the head with the best intentions. No damage beyond the need for a haircut and the smell of singed hair.
That is one of the worst smells ever. I do not know why that is so obnoxious, but burnt hair smell is awful.
Well, he gives us a link to, I guess, a blog post he'd written at Modeling in China, John's Models. I've got a link. That's new to me. He's not mentioned this before, to my knowledge. But anyway, he's saying his wife is probably the victim of his worst modeling-related injury, and he's not going to repeat it here, but suffice to say, she sacrificed a toenail for the cause.
Oh, man, it's hard to come back from that one. You owe her a lot.
Hopefully he's paid that debt long since. Man, we got a lot, Dave.
That's good. That's great. Listen, I'm telling you, the community is the thing I enjoy most about this.
Toles Nielsen is back from Denmark. He's got a good question, Dave.
Which is?
How do I get decals straight? Example, vehicle numbers or for a license plate. Any tricks?
Oh, that is so tough. Well, first of all, keep in mind, okay, this is a cheat. First of all, keep in mind, they're not always straight on the real thing because those things are done with stencils. And if you look, there are plenty of them, plenty of photos you can find where the numbers are not straight. So don't feel bad if you don't get them straight. But that is a really great question that I've never considered. I put the decals on, and if it's individual numbers that I've got to line up, I put them on one at a time, and I have water and a very fine brush, and I tease it back and forth till I get it where I think it looks right. And I'm not sure if there's a good tip on how to make sure they all end up straight.
I've got a little bit of experience from the rail car decorating.
Yeah.
Because the railroad I modeled was from my East Tennessee upbringing. It's the Clinchfield Railroad, which is 11 letters long. And a lot of their hoppers were rib-sided, and there was only one letter between the ribs.
Right.
So you've got 11 letters you got to get straight across 4 inches.
Gotcha.
Now, you got a little bit of an advantage because it's an odd number of characters. So the first one you put on the model is the one in the exact middle.
I hadn't thought about that.
And then you work your way out left and right from that. Now, license plates don't have as many numbers, and a lot of them, I don't know how it is in Denmark, but in the United States, they're usually 6, right?
Right.
So you might have to place the center 2 and then put the ones on the outside of that. It's an old trick that my mother actually showed me doing science project posters in grade school.
Huh. I had never thought about that at all, but that is a great idea.
Now, that might work sometimes for some things, is to start in the middle and work your way out. Another trick I learned was to be very meticulous cutting those things out of the sheet if they are individual, and make sure that you have a horizontal line across the tops of all the characters. Because even trying to hide the film, that'll at least give you a little bit of a visual reference and at the light at the right angle. But it's hard. It just takes skill and practice. But typically, if I've got a long string to do, I'll start in the middle and work my way out left and right.
If another listener out there has a hack or a tip about what they do that helps them get those all even, I'd love to hear it, because it's not something I'd ever considered. And yeah, that is something that, if, as an aircraft modeler, you do enough that if there's some trick I don't know about, I'd like to hear it.
Up next is Stephen Lee, Mr. Sprue Pie with Frets.
Yes, who's been on a tear lately on his blog.
I need to get caught up then, but this is not related to his blog. Mr. Lee will be in the Chicagoland area in July, and in the northern Indiana area, Hammond, Munster, St. John.
That's Three Floyds territory.
Well, that's why he's writing in. He is offering to drop by on his trip and act as liaison to help us get to the bottom of this kit box mystery.
Well, I would love that. I would appreciate that, because it clearly is. We've reached out every way possible, and it's clearly going to take a personal visit by somebody to get this accomplished.
So I say, Stephen, you are
deputized,
fully deputized as Mojovian Agent 002. Sorry, one's already taken. It's our Jamaican meat patty connection up in Indianapolis, but you are 002. So have at it, man. And I think Dave might be able to give you a contact of sorts through social media somehow. So let's get on this. Let's make this happen.
Let's make this happen. Absolutely.
Because they're going to come out with another one.
Yep. Oh, I guarantee you. I guarantee you we're going to see a monogram box at some point.
Possibly.
And maybe a Hasegawa.
Could. Up next, Andrew Whitey from our friends over at the Model Geeks.
Yep.
He's got a modeling injury too, Dave.
Uh-oh. What did he do?
It's the infamous number 11 Exacto in the number 1 handle, or the number 2, whichever is the small one, I guess. Rolled off the table. Had both hands holding parts.
Ooh.
Pure instinct. Slam your legs together.
Yes. Yep.
Well, Mr. Whitey didn't get just the average cut, Dave. He buried that number 11 into his thigh to the hilt of the blade, millimeters from his femoral artery.
Oh.
So his wife's an ER nurse, so he hollered out to her, and she came down and told him to chill out. He was fine, but he's now has a square knife handle.
Definitely. And that's the other thing. Obviously, having a knife handle with something on it to prevent it from rolling is tip number 1. But I've also wondered if maybe the folks who make the knife handles shouldn't put the weight at the back end, so that if it rolls off a table, instead of orienting nose down, it'll orient tail down.
Well, maybe. That's a short drop distance, though.
It is.
Physics might not work.
I'm here to tell you, I have had a similar injury, except it was my foot, not my thigh. Oh, God, it gives me the chills.
Well, he says he looks forward to seeing everybody in Omaha. Same for us, man. And we're glad you didn't martyr yourself for the cause.
That's right.
Father Deacon Raphael Shelton from Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Oh, he also listens to the podcast while he's doing yard work.
Good. I'm glad that it's not just me and OTB.
I said one thing he really appreciates about all the modeling podcasts in the model sphere is the variety. He goes on to say he fully expects Terry Measley from Scale Model Podcast to call out that Luft 46 suborbital bomber is something he'd be interested in. And he says he truly enjoys that you and I are grumpy about paper panzers and Luft 46, while the Canadians are excited for what-if sci-fi possibilities. And he sent us a little gif of it's John Goodman, Jeff Bridges. What's the movie?
Oh, The Big Lebowski.
Yeah, that's right. And it's the line, yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Yeah, it's just like your opinion.
Anyway, I'm going to go one further and say, to poke a little fun here, that the Canadians are notorious for being nice, at least till they get to know you, right?
Yeah.
As we've learned. So I would argue that when they see a new release and those guys say, oh, that has great what if or sci-fi possibilities, or better yet, that has great kit bash potential, that's just really a nice Canadian way of saying that I really wouldn't ever want to build that. And to be honest, I'm not sure why anybody else would want to build that in the form presented. So my best thought of anything to do with that is to break it up and build something else with it.
I think that's true. The Canadians are, among all their other attributes, they are unfailingly polite. I'm not sure you could ever get them to actually criticize a release. Whereas, on the other hand, I'm grumpy. I know of all the things that we still need a good modern kit of. And so every time I see another paper panzer, it just means that that's more plastic that could have been to something that we really do need.
Or not. We don't really need any of it, do we?
Well, okay, neat. If we're going to get that philosophical, that's just going to destroy the whole underpinnings of the hobby. So let's not go there.
All right. Scott McPhee from way up north, Saskatoon. Sandy Bay, Saskatchewan, actually.
Right.
He's got a good one. It's not a highly technical question, but he says he's thinking of starting a model build club at the school where he's a teacher.
Yeah.
It's a great idea.
It is.
Should we all build the same kit, or is variety the spice of life? Should 4 or 5 weeks be the time span?
That is a great question. If you all build the same thing, how we all have different interests, the downside of everybody building the same thing is that it might not spark the fire in one or more of the kids who aren't interested in that particular subject. Whereas if you let them choose among what they want, they may be more likely to catch fire in the hobby and stick with it.
I would probably say that, yeah, I would go the route of variety, but you might do some investigation and background checking to see what kits of the various genre might be most applicable to folks just starting out at that age.
Yeah, I know Airfix has a range of easier build kits.
That's true. Yeah,
there's everything from airplanes to tanks to cars to stuff. So that Airfix, that particular range, might be a really good way to let the kids pick the variety, and still you're all going to have pretty similar experiences. But I think that's a great idea, is starting a hobby club at a school if you're a teacher. Most kids ultimately may not stick with it, but you're going to plant the seed that may take 20 or 30 years to grow, but ultimately come back to modeling.
Well, good luck with that, Scott.
Absolutely.
Let us know what you decide, and if you got any more questions, feel free to ask.
And send pictures. If you get the club going, we want pictures. And by the way, reach out to IPMS Canada. If you do this, reach out to them. I'm sure that they will. You may find some support from them for your endeavor.
That's true. Another good idea, Dave.
I'm full of them.
You might be at your limit, though. I don't know. All right. Well, my last one from the email side of things is our good friend Michael Karnaka up in New York City.
Yep.
With his question of the episode yet again.
And man, he's been hitting it out of the park lately.
Gents, I was wondering if there was a subject you had, quote, so ugly it's beautiful for some unexplained reason, so I have to get or make a model of it. For me, for him, for Michael, it's the Soviet Mi-10 helicopter.
Yep.
Massive beast, he says. Looks like a big metal grasshopper. And he sent a picture. And
it's the equivalent of the CH-54 Sky Crane. It was the Soviet/Russian version of our CH-54.
Except they looks like they took an existing helicopter and put it on stilts because it doesn't have the cutout spine area like ours does.
Yep, you are right. Their engineering solution was a little bit different.
Well, you got one?
God, I got several. The so ugly it's beautiful. The Vickers Wildebeest comes to mind. This is going to offend the Canadian listeners. The CF-100, the Clunk, is not the most attractive aircraft in the world, but I wouldn't call it ugly, but it's functional. What else? There's a number of these things. I know a lot of people like the OV-1. What was it? Clearprop just released an OV-1 Mohawk. And that is one of those aircraft that, now to me, it's just plain ugly. But I know a lot of modelers for whom it's so ugly, it's beautiful. And so they were real happy to see that Clearprop release.
A lot of those Vietnam era small attack and observation planes, like the Bronco and the little Cessna Dragonfly.
Yep.
Yeah, they're all kind of like that, in my opinion.
Yep. So now on the armor side, let's flip the question to you. Now I know what do you consider ugly in armor, and what do you consider so ugly it's beautiful?
That's a good question. I think those two prototypes the Soviets built, that SMK tank and the T-100.
Yeah.
Those went up to Finland for some newsreel work, and one of them saw a little bit of combat, I think. But those are interesting, and they're not very attractive. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I like those. The Hungarian Turan and the self-propelled gun based off that as well aren't particularly attractive tanks, but they have a very interesting look to them, I think.
Yeah. Kind of uniquely Hungarian.
And then I've got a 1/12 bust of you, Dave.
Oh, no. Ow! Oh! Yeah. Can somebody? There's a dagger back there. Can somebody just reach in my back, pull that out? Oh, that was cold, man. That was cold.
Just kidding, man.
Yeah.
It's a good question. Armor, a lot of the World War I tanks are ugly. That guy, what's that French one? The
Schneider.
Yeah, the Schneider.
Yeah,
that one's kind of interesting. I like that one. That's pretty ugly. Looks
I would argue that German A7V is ugly. And as far as World War I tanks go, there were some ugly, and between the wars, there were, heck, the Bob Semple tank, World War II New Zealand Bob Semple tank, which apparently Vargas is doing. Now, you want to talk about ugly. That thing is ugly.
Well, that's a good question.
Yeah, he continues to ask great ones.
Well, from the email side, that's it for me. What do you got?
Facebook has been very active the last 2 weeks. Lots of y'all have reached out to us via Facebook Messenger, and please continue to do so, or please continue to email us. Seriously, the interactions are really what makes this fun to do. The day that I was started with DMing Goldfinch, in the middle of the day, I was working from home that day. In the middle of the day, a fairly new returning to modeler, George Welch, reached out and asked me an interesting question, which was, he's getting into or back into modeling, has an interest in the Zero, and wanted to know what the best kits were in each of the three normal scales, 72nd, 48th, and 32nd. And so we had some interactions back and forth. Ultimately, my conclusion was 72nd scale, there's no question. The Tamiya 72nd scale Zero series is still the finest model kits I've ever built in my life. I've built 2 of them so far, and I've got plenty more to build because they are just wonderful kits. 48 scale, I recommended the new Edward 48 scale Zero kit. Edward Engineering is fantastic. That kit's getting a lot of praise. But I did say in 48 scale, the old Tamiya Zero, which is that kit's, that kit's not a spring chicken. It wasn't done in the last 5 years. If you can find it, and a lot of times you can find it on a seconds table at a show for, just a few bucks. It still builds up to fantastic kit. 32nd scale, there is no question. The Tamiya Zero that was released about 10 years ago in 32nd scale is just one of the finest kits out there. It's not cheap, but it is super well engineered and can be made up into a beautiful model. So that was my response to him, but I'd be interested to know from the aircraft modelers out there, particularly ones who built the Zero kits, would your advice have been the same as mine? I mentioned on a previous episode that I didn't like to spray pure white or pure black, but particularly pure white, particularly pure gloss white. And one of the modelers reached out, one of the listeners, Lee Edmonds, reached out and commented on something that I completely had not thought of, which is airliner models. In airliner models, you really, because you're going for that stark white that a lot of airline aircraft or the liveries are truly white. So using a gray like a super light gray just doesn't work. And he said he uses either Tamiya or SMS to hit it with the base coat as the primer, then a lot of sanding. Then he uses automotive lacquer for the pure white to get that high gloss, high polish airliner finish. And that sounds right to me, but I had not even considered when I was talking about it, the thought that, airliner guys can't use the trick of not using actual white. They really in most cases need an actual stark white.
They got to shine like justice, man.
They shine like justice. They want that really, really white appearance. So, if there are any other airliner modelers out there listening and you have input on how you do your white, I still think it's one of the most problematic colors to paint. That, yellow, and any sort of day glow are just 3 of the more difficult colors to paint. So anybody out there listening has any tips on those, I'm more than interested. Finally, as I mentioned earlier, Wonderfest was held almost 2 weeks ago here in Louisville, and it is a fantastic show. If you have never been to it, you should come. Even if sci-fi and fantasy figures and monster figures and stuff like that aren't your particular area of super interest, there's still a lot of really, really great models there. And the vendor room, while more sci-fi focused, you can find a lot of stuff that is the military oriented. So it's a great show. And Canadian Bill Webb reached out to me because he was coming down to the show and wanted to know if we'd be there, which we normally would be, but this year was a little bit unusual for both Mike and I with family duties. But he reached out, and I was able to steal a couple hours, go to the show for a couple hours, hang out. We got to meet up. We got to talk, and he supplied me with some Canadian beer, which 6 of those I'm saving for you, Mike. So don't worry, you'll get your half. And I got to say, it's so far it's been really good. Modelers are good guys. I mean, you meet somebody that has listened to the podcast who you've only interacted with DMing to meet up at the show, and there's an immediate rapport. I mean, you're talking about we were talking about airbrushing. He had just attended, there's an airbrush seminar at Wonderfest, and he had just attended that. And so we were talking about airbrushing and all of this stuff, and it's a natural conversation where you're immediately friends, just simply because of the nature of the fact that you both speak a very common language. And he also is another listener who was getting back into modeling. And I'm telling you, I am amazed at the number, and maybe it was the pandemic, maybe it's the age cohort coming back in or what, but so many of the people we talk to are coming into the hobby for the first time or coming back into the hobby in the last 2 years. And man, it's nothing but good for the hobby.
All right. Is that all you got?
Yep.
Well, if you'd like to write into the show, we hope you would. You can do so via email to plasticmodelmojo@gmail.com, or as Dave's been talking about in his little spiel there from his side of it, Facebook Messenger. You can reach out that way and get he or I and have a little conversation there. It's always fun. Coming up for a future episode, I've kind of got a call to action. I'd like to hear from a lot of you folks, as many as possible. What kit did you have as a kid or teenager, up to teenager, I guess, if you modeled as a child or before you were an adult, that you set with a kit that you had, that you in your mind set a higher than normal expectation for, and then when you executed, it either ended in utter disappointment or disaster. So tell us your story. So let us know about that. If you've got something along those lines you'd like to share, we'd like to hear it.
Yes, we really would. Mike and I texted back and forth on this subject, and it brought back some real memories. So I'm interested to hear what the listeners have to say on that subject. Well, Mike, this is the point in the episode where I ask the listeners, if you wouldn't mind, when you're done listening to this, would you please go to whatever podcast app you use and rate the podcast? We'd appreciate it if you'd give it 5 stars. It helps us grow the podcast. If you're listening but you haven't subscribed in whatever podcatcher app you use, please go ahead and subscribe so that you don't miss an episode. And finally, if you have a modeling friend out there who isn't listening to the podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would recommend it to them. The podcast continues to grow. We continue to add new listeners, much to both Mike and I's continued amazement. This thing continues to get bigger and bigger. One of the ways that happens is if you all will tell your other modeling friends to listen. Give us a recommendation. It's the best way for us to get a new listener.
You can also take in all the other podcasts out in the model sphere. And to do that, just go to modelpodcast.com. Modelpodcast.com is a consortium website put together by Stuart Clark of Scale Model Podcasts that provide a single repository for all the podcasts out there in the model sphere who have chosen to participate in this with us. You can go to modelpodcast.com and there's a banner link to each of the other websites you're participating. It's just an easy way to go find all those at once if you're not subscribed to them, and figure out what everybody else has got to say. So check it out, modelpodcast.com. In addition to that, there's all sorts of content out there in the model sphere. Please check out our blog and YouTube friends. We've mentioned him before. Special Agent 002, Stephen Lee, Sprue Pie with Frets. Please check out his blog. Dave says he's been white hot lately, and I need to get caught up, I guess.
He has.
Chris Wallace, model airplane maker, blog and YouTube channel. Always got something good to say and always got a good video.
We need to have Chris back on sometime.
We do. And needs to get some more t-shirts printed.
Yes, he does. We were teasing him about that today.
Jeff Groves, the Inch High Guy, all things 72nd scale. Please check out the Inch High Guy blog for your 72nd scale enjoyment. And finally, You're Not Fired, Jim Bates, a Scale Canadian TV. Please check out his YouTube channel and send him email imploring him to come to Nationals.
Absolutely. He needs to be there. This is going to be a year where there is a gathering that probably isn't going to be repeated anytime soon of all the podcasters, and we need Jim to be our MC like he was out in Las Vegas.
That's right.
Finally, for those of you who've listening, if you're not a member of your national IPMS organization, please consider joining. That's IPMS USA, IPMS Canada for our friends in the Great White North, IPMS Australia, IPMS New Zealand, IPMS Norway, whatever. Please join your national organization. The national IPMS does a lot to support modeling, and it's really important that you not only join, but join and then get involved, because the more you get involved, the better off you're going to be, the more you're going to support the hobby, and the more fun you're going to have. My interactions with the other modelers that I've met through the national organization is some of the most fun I have. So if you're not yet a member, join and come to the Nationals. If you come to IPMS USA Nationals, you can register and compete as long as you are a member of any IPMS national organization from any country.
Well, Dave, let's take a short break here and have a word from our sponsor. Plastic Model Mojo is now brought to you by Model Paint Solutions, your source for Harder Steenbeck airbrushes, David Union power tools, and laboratory-grade mixing, measuring, and storage tools for use with all your model paints, be they acrylic, enamels, or lacquers. Check them out at www.modelpaintsolutions.com. Dave, we're back, and it is Wagons Ho for Omaha.
We're getting close, Mike. I can feel it.
Well, Dave, at the time of this recording, we are 38 days away from the IPMS National Convention in Omaha, Nebraska.
Oh, man. No wonder my palms are sweating.
Well, I got a nice email from Scott Hackney, the show chairman, this week, and he expects no big surprises at present time. Hopefully there won't be any big surprises other than more folks than they anticipated showing up. That wouldn't be all right.
That's always a good surprise.
Says everything is on track for a great convention. They've capped 600 pre-registrations.
Oh, that's great.
The vendor rooms are full. Vendor rooms, plural. There's 2 of them.
Yep.
Night at the museum, the SAC Museum. That event is booked solid. You can go to the museum on your own during normal operating hours, but the Night at the Museum ropes off tour and dinner is booked solid.
I'm looking forward to that.
And you can also check out the Speed Museum, too. That one also sounds interesting. He says the convention decals are due this week, and they got over 500 T-shirts on order. And he hopes that folks are not deterred by the gas prices.
Well, listen, dig deep. If it costs you a few extra bucks to drive there, go ahead and do it. Believe me, you're not going to regret it.
Well, then on our side, I got the car rental booked. And hopefully you're still working on this hotel correction.
Yes, yeah. So we've got our hotel booked, and we're trying to expand our booking a little bit, but we'll see how that works out.
And we've got our shopping list in the works for the Mojo Dojo.
Oh, yes. Fully stocked, I believe, is the term that's being bandied about.
We'll see. Hope so.
You and me both. Listen, Vegas is going to be real hard to top. It is going to be very hard to top. Our hotel room was hopping every night in Vegas.
We can be a little more prepared this time, and maybe it'll go better. Not that it went bad, but
no, it went great.
Always room for improvement.
That's right. We're leveling up.
Well, that's interesting because that's sort of the theme of our special segment, which we're going to change things around a little bit this episode and put this in right now. So our special segment, Dave, is that next level build. Dude, I leveled up. next level build, it kind of stems from, Chris Wallace, a model airplane maker a while back, had a blog post kind of titled that. And he was looking at, showing off some of these other models some other people had built that were, in a lot of ways over the top, some of them.
Sure.
And then he was kind of pondering how he might move the needle on his own skills and take on something with a little bit more meat to it. And then also in a recent Plastic Posse podcast, Scott and his crew talked about, their level up build, a project they had where they kind of moved the needle on their expertise, something they could carry forward, into most of their next projects. And we touched on it once before in the past too, I believe.
Yeah, I think we tangentially discussed the subject.
Yeah, well, we do that often with what's your plan for getting better. But what do you think, man? What do you think, just kind of the front end of this, without getting too far into the weeds just yet, about next level builds?
I think it's in general good for your, and I have some observations, but in general, I think it's good for your hobby to occasionally just decide that you are going to do something way over the top. Now, you're not always going to succeed, but you know that old saying, a man's reach must exceed his grasp, or else what are dreams for? Doing that next level build, imagining that, okay, I'm going to do this. Yeah, it sounds kind of crazy. I'm going to do one or more things I've never done before. And I think that really does stimulate your modeling. You may not always accomplish it, but even the simple attempt at doing it, I think, provides benefit for your day-to-day modeling.
Oh, I think so too. And, by next level build, we just mean something above and beyond your comfort zone with your current skill set, I think would be a kind of a general way to put that. Yeah. And, we talk about what's your plan for getting better. And I think one advantage to doing this sort of thing, taking a project that's out of your comfort zone, particularly with your skill set. I mean, you can go outside your genre and probably do okay in most of them with your current skill set, at least to that level of satisfaction you have with what you're doing in your primary genre already.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to learn something new. But the big advantage, I think, is when you bite that off, especially if you have a reasonable level of success with it, is that it makes the next bite a whole lot easier to take.
Yep.
Success builds upon success, really.
I've noticed something, and maybe you've noticed it too. Have you ever seen a younger modeler back, just into the hobby or just back into the hobby, who takes on a project that you're like, oh my God, they're just wildly out of the ordinary or out of reach. And one of the reasons they manage to accomplish it is because they don't know they're not supposed to be. They're not supposed to be able to. That,
yeah.
That, it's like, I want this, so I'm going to do this. And if it involves all this new stuff, I'm just going to reach out and do it. And I'm constantly amazed by younger modelers who just have no fear because they don't know how big a bite of the apple they're taking. And so there's not that fear that a more experienced modeler looks at that same project and goes, yeah, I'd like to do that, but there's just so much involved in that. I don't think I'm up to that. I'm not sure I could pull that off.
I'll wait till I'm better.
Yeah, I'll wait till I'm better. And you know what? You'll be in your coffin saying, I'll wait till I'm better. Don't wait till you're better. Do it now.
We've all got projects that kind of fall into this category of either trying to make yourself better or a project. You may not have even intended it to be this level up kind of thing, right?
Right.
It may just ended up there because you had to do something different to pull something off. Have you got any examples?
I can think of a couple. The first one, and this goes back to he was too young and stupid to know he wasn't supposed to be able to do this, or that he shouldn't try to do this. Now, I know none of the listeners here can imagine, but I take you back to the early 80s. And in the early 80s, there was not, believe it or not, a kit, a mainstream manufactured kit of the McDonnell Douglas F4C/D Phantom, the Air Force version of the Phantom from Vietnam. Nobody made a kit of this thing. Well, I wanted to do Ritchie and DeBellevue's Triple Nickel, the MiG Killer, the one that had the five stars on the splitter plate. Believe it or not, there were decals available for it, but there was no kit of it. So you had to bash your own kit. And, I was fairly fresh back into modeling. I wanted to do this model. There was no current kit of it. And so instead of saying, well, I'll just wait for somebody to do, it's like, no, heck, I'll just kit bash it. So I took an Italeri RF, it's an RF4C or an RF4E, I forget which, and the Airfix F4B, which donated the nose to the kit. And I kit bashed it together along with some sheet styrene, a lot of putty, a lot of sanding to make the F4D that I wanted with the Vietnam markings. It came out pretty good. And all of you listeners now have me to thank, because immediately upon completing that kit, Hasegawa, Fujimi, and everybody announced an entirely new F4 series, including all of the F4Cs and Ds. So you all have me personally to thank for the fact that there are kits of those aircraft now. If I was faced with that today, having been built models for 30 plus years, I am pretty sure I would say, you know what, that project's too... Now, I'm not going to do that. There's plenty of other stuff I want to build. But there's a virtue to not being smart enough or not being afraid enough to just go ahead and do it. And I ended up with an aircraft, in my case, that I wanted. And I learned a lot while doing it, too. So do you have one that comes to mind for you? I know one of yours.
We'll go back before that one, though.
Okay.
When I was a teenager and in the first IPMS club I was ever in, and kind of after you've had your aha moment and you decide to get serious about this, which I think is the topic of a recent Model Geeks episode. Maybe their last one. I'm a couple behind, but I need to listen to that because I'm sure I could relate to it. Anyway, when I got to that aha point, and I was trying to be quote unquote serious about this, I built a Tiger 1E, the late one, the steel wheel one, with the cupola on it, with the periscopes and the anti-aircraft ring, right?
Yeah.
And the recipe back then, I mean, now that you got your pick of kits, but
yep.
Back in the 80s, it was you had to take the Tamiya early Tiger 1 and you had to bash it with the Nikimo or Nichimo late version.
Yeah.
You had to remount all the wheels and modify the turret and use their cupola. And there's quite a bit to it. I still have this model. In fact, it's the one I posted on our Facebook page a year or so ago with a chicken running out in front of it. Yeah, that was kind of my first foray into kit bash and modification. And I learned a lot. I learned what not having the right tool for the job can, how that can derail you sometimes.
Oh, yeah.
I learned it takes a lot of work to get road wheels straight sometimes when you're cutting off torsion bar arms and drilling holes and trying to mount something that wasn't supposed to be there on there, and on and on and on. Because I really tried to detail it up, and now I look at it and it's pretty rough in retrospect. I thought it was golden back then, but
sure,
it's it was an interesting journey to get that one done. I put Zimmered on it for the first time using Squadron Green Putty.
Oh man.
And, I was happy with it.
Okay. Why did you decide you wanted to do that? With my F4 build, I wanted that Ritchie into Bellevue MiG killer, and that was the only way I was going to get it. What was it that inspired you enough to say, okay, I'm going to take these kits and I'm going to do all of this? Was there a particular?
There was a particular profile or piece of artwork in the Osprey book on the Tiger tank that I wanted to do because I liked the look of it. It was Normandy campaign. I just had more interest at that time in those later ones. And then there was an article in one of the magazines at that time that kind of got into that conversion. And then I think even at that time, Verlinden was just coming on the scene.
Yeah.
Well, he had been on the modeling scene, but as far as a manufacturer,
right,
as a player in the industry, right, and he came out with a little green covered book. It was the On Target series, I think they were called.
I remember them. I actually own a couple.
And then there's one on the Tiger tanks, and that conversion's in there. So I was looking at that, I think, and it's like, yeah, I think I can do that. So I did it. And
now, did you vary from what was in his book? Did you along the way decide, well, there's something I want to change, or there's something I want to add, or did you just straight follow his guidance?
For the kit parts, pretty much followed his guidance, but to get the Zimmered, he'd used that hot tool, pyrogravure.
Yeah.
And, back at that time and not too long after, everybody's trying to chase those things and do it like he was doing it. But I fell back on the green putty and the HO scale corrugated roof tin technique that was outlined in the Shep Payne books. That's what I did. So in that regard, I did, but I fell onto somebody else's instructions or guidance. I pretty much followed it, and a lot of my detailing was different because I didn't understand or have access to some of the stuff they were using. So I just kind of made mine up as I went along. Well, you got another one?
Yes, I do. The Dragon MiG-17 for the longest time, the only game in town for MiG-17 was the Hasegawa MiG-17 PF, where if you wanted to convert it to a MiG-17C, you had to take the PF. It was oversized. You had to cut down the wings. You had to add new wing fences. You actually had to cut down the canopy. You had to get a aftermarket splitter plate that didn't have the lip for the radar. And so when Dragon came out with their MiG-17, it was that kit has its flaws, but it was a huge step forward. Well, I wanted to do, I love the MiG-17, one of my favorite aircraft. So I wanted to do it, obviously, when it came out. And I wanted to do what was at the time a big craze was salt chipping, which really people don't do much anymore, and with good reason, because now with chipping fluids and all, there's a lot better ways to do it. But I hadn't done it before, so I decided I was going to do a heavily chipped MiG-17 from Nigeria during the Biafran conflict, and went ahead, did it. And the underlying challenge, of course, is you have to put bare metal down first in order to be able to chip it away to reveal the bare metal. That's where I came along and first learned that if you take an aircraft that you're going to put in bare metal and prime it, quote unquote, prime it with future, because future is self-leveling and seeps into sanding cracks and scratches, it can give you a beautiful finish if you put Alclad over a model that's been primed in clear future. And that worked out beautifully. And in retrospect, frankly, I wished I would have left the model in bare metal because it was one of the better bare metal finishes that I've ever had. But because I wanted to do this salt chipping thing, I laid the salt down and then sprayed over with a medium green, and then chipped the salt away to reveal the bare metal underneath. The technique worked out somewhat. It was not as good as I would have wanted it, but at the end, when I got to the end, I had an aircraft that I wanted. The technique of salt chipping, while again quickly got surpassed by the hairspray technique and stuff like that, it was beyond my current set of skills. But I really felt like I had done a couple of things that I had never done before. And frankly, it gave me a lot of confidence, particularly because the bare metal part came out so well, gave me the confidence to build more bare metal aircraft, which I'm even now continuing on.
Well, we've talked about my big one on here several times, and we can't have a segment like this without mentioning it. But it was that Su-76 I built.
Yep.
And by the time I started that project, I had a fairly significant Sturmgeschütz conversion under my belt that had been built partially using a few pieces from a Schmidt vacuform kit. So I'm really dating myself now.
Yeah.
And then I'd also built to me a KV-1 with a lot of detailing. That model's got completely scratch built fenders on it. Some of those skills had gotten honed pretty well. And this Su-76 though, this is the first time I really scratch built that much of a model.
I was going to say, there's not much of the kit in that model.
Yes, the lower hull and the wheels, the road wheels.
Speaking of which, before you go into detail on it, again, let me go back to the same question on the Tiger and then my F4. What was the inspiration? Why an Su-76? What was it about that said, yes, there's nothing good out there, but you still want to do it?
Well, I was investigating that project before there was ever a kit at all. And there was I can't remember who did it, but somebody did a spread. You remember when Fine Scale used to have the technical spreads in the middle?
Yes.
They'd take a subject and they'd have, a handful of photographs, the technical stats, and then line drawings.
Right.
That, and then all the Zaloga books, it was the second most produced Soviet vehicle next to T-34.
Right.
So there's a lot of them. It seemed like a big hole, and that was just kind of the way my interests were going. And I was looking at, doing the whole thing, and then Alan came out with this kit, and it wasn't great. It was really thick and heavy. It went together kind of clunky, but like the road wheels and stuff, for my mindset at the time was, salvaged from this kit or that kit. Well, the closest looking thing to a T60, T70, Su-76 kind of road wheel at the time was like the wheels off a Tamiya Panzer II. And I was trying to figure out how to make all that work. And in all my engineering planning, this kit was released. Like, okay, well, how far does that get me? So I bought that kit at the National Convention in 1992 in Atlanta, Georgia.
I remember that one.
And I worked on it a long time, but the thing in that build that shaped me as a modeler the most was drawing from a lot of sources and only taking the best, cherry picking without, just really reckless abandon, just not worrying if I used 25% of a photo etch set, not worrying about only using 30% of a plastic kit. Just didn't care. That model made me take the kind of the project. I'm building a model of this vehicle. I'm not building a kit of this vehicle.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. That is your style now.
And yeah, it is. That's kind of my style now. And and with some projects, it's more than others, right? I don't have any problem building a good kit with a minimal amount of change to it if it needs any at all. I really don't. But that one was kind of the epitome of building the subject, but not building the kit. And that's a good way to put it. It kind of honed my style, the kind of projects I like to do. And a kit and an item of aftermarket, whatever, they're all means to an end that, they're all going to contribute something less than 100% in their own regard.
Now for listeners who don't remember this, back in this time, the Soviet Union was just in the process of falling. So, it wasn't like reference on a Sherman where there's crap loads of reference.
Oh yeah, this is true.
And not only that, but some of the reference was conflicting. How did you suss out what bits of reference to grab from what reference pieces when you're presented with two conflicting pieces of information about, let's just say, the shell rack in the interior of the Su-76? How, if you're presented with two conflicting pieces of information about it, how did you make a determination, okay, this is right or this is wrong, or they're both wrong or they're both half right? How did you dig that out?
Well, I guess the biggest thing to figure out was, they built that vehicle after the war and they changed it a little bit, but not much. So there wasn't a whole lot to weed out. The problem is that model was built before the internet.
Yeah.
So everything I used for reference that didn't come out of that old Fine Scale article was a picture here or two there from, a pretty big stack of other books.
Yeah.
And there's a post-war vehicle at Aberdeen Proving Grounds. Well, there was.
Yeah. A long time ago.
Yeah.
It's now down in Georgia, I think.
Or it's returned to the earth. I don't know.
No, I think it got shipped down.
So I don't think that project was as bad as you might imagine. It was just mostly lack of information and trying to piece it together from really a bunch of books that by today's standards aren't that good anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, because they were old. Like you said, the Soviet Union was just in the throes of imploding at that point. Well, they're dealing with the fallout of imploding, I guess, by 92, 93.
Right.
So there wasn't that Allen was kind of the first new manufacturer to come out of the former Soviet Union, at least in armor anyway. And that was their first kit. So you can imagine.
Yeah.
But, a lot of these logo titles, there's a few pictures here, a few pictures there. And then I took a bunch at Aberdeen one time. Some of the biggest conflicts was some of the aftermarket was just crap. I mean, like there was an Edward photo etch set from the early Edward stuff. And basically like the ammo racks, they had just made photo etch versions of the incorrect ones in the kit. So what's that worth, right?
Right. And that happened. I don't think it happens as much nowadays.
No, it
but
doesn't.
In the early days of aftermarket, I don't think people realize how much aftermarket folks just took the kit part and cast it or did photo etch of it or whatever medium they were working in and put it on the market without, at that point, there was no thought, oh, well, let me, or I won't say no thought, because there were plenty of cottage aftermarket manufacturers who did put a lot into it, but there were plenty of them who just cloned the kit part without ever saying, okay, how am I going to improve this? Or how am I going to accurize it?
Well, and those ammo racks in the Su-76 are a good example of cherry picking stuff. The kit ammo racks were unusable unless you really just didn't care. The Edward racks, the bodies of the racks were photo etched versions of the kit racks, so they were equally inaccurate. But the clips for the rounds in the racks out of the Edward set were usable. Now, folks may remember some of the old timers out there, the old Commander Series resin stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty rough stuff.
Yeah.
Well, they had an SU-76 update set for that kit, and it had a photo etch fret in it. Now, the racks in that kit were trying to be the right shape, but they were so poorly etched, the fold lines weren't there, and there was no way to get them formed up correctly because you're trying to fold the full thickness of the metal in parts of the places, and they're really garbage. So I didn't use much out of that kit. I scratch built the ammo racks out of plastic and used the Edward clips for the rounds. And then I'm working on something for the Zis 2 base we'll get into later, but there's a technique I use, and I showed it on the Facebook page, where I coil plastic strip around like a brass rod and then dunk it in boiling water.
Yeah.
And thermoform that into rings. And you can cut it and make uniform rings out of it. Well,
yep.
The SU-76, there's seats in the bottom of the ammo rack for the bottom of the shell casing. And that's how I made those. First time I'd ever done that. So now here I am, decade and change later, using it again on something else. So that was a technique I learned there. So, new technique, using the best parts that were out there for what I was trying to do, and just coming up with what I wanted. So that was the kind of the next level, or the level up there, kind of setting that mentality for my modeling going forward.
What are your future magnum what's the plural of opus? Opie?
Do I have a magnum opus or a new next level build?
Yes.
On the horizon?
Well, I know we've talked about the Reba Botan, and we know that's a long-term, basically from scratch build. So that's got to qualify as one of those magnum opus or next level builds.
Sure.
But beyond that, do you have another one that you are contemplating as just, I'm going to reach well beyond my grasp?
Well, the Botan for sure. When I get this Zis done, I start something next. Either the Katyusha or the KV-85 are going to be along a similar vein as the SU-76. And there won't be as much scratch building, obviously, because there's a lot more to draw from. But both of those are picking and choosing from a host of kits and aftermarkets. So I've already got all that accumulated. So on the scratch side of things, I'll mention again later, but as soon as I get my hands on one of those Scharnhorst turrets and figure out how I'm going to do the catapult for that thing, that's going to be a next level, or a level up there too.
Oh, absolutely.
And the more aircraft I keep building, those are all level ups.
Yes. And then you're one day going to go all crazy on an aircraft like you did on the SU-76. And I'm there for it. I can't wait for that.
Yeah, maybe. I'll have one that comes to mind every now and then, but right now I can't think of one in particular. But yeah, I want to really go the extra mile on a 72nd scale plane at some point. Hopefully not too far out.
Kingfisher,
maybe. You got one?
Yeah, I've got a couple. Number one is, we talked with Steve Hustad. I really admire his work. And one of the reasons I admire it is because he pulls off 72nd scale aircraft dioramas. One of the things I have always wanted to do is a 72nd scale aircraft diorama that doesn't look like a toy. It looks like a diorama, and just like what he does. And so somewhere in the future, I am not sure exactly where, I'm not sure exactly how the subject is going to look. I've got my eye on, there's a couple of photographs of a DO-17 from the Battle of Britain that ended up crashing into a railroad cut. Two sets of tracks, and there's a sloped sides where the up to the level of the ground, and the aircraft crashed and slid along, and then right as it came to rest inside the railroad cut across the tracks. And it's very well documented. There are a number of photographs of it, and I've always wanted to do that. And so I eventually want to do an aircraft diorama in the style of Steve Hustad with my limited modeling skills. Another one that I would like to do is, and I've had this idea for a long time, I would like to do basically a German dock scene with take one of the Revell Type 7 or Type 9 U-boats, cut it at the waterline, put it in a scene up next to a quay where you might also have a S-boat and maybe a flying boat tied up to a pier side. And I'm talking about something that would probably be fairly large, like 3.5 feet by 3.5 feet. So, this is one of those, I dream about it. I think about it. I pick up kits here and there that I can use for the idea, but it's nothing more right now in my mind than something I turn over in my imagination. But one day I would actually like to do that.
All right. Well, I guess I don't have any more. I would just challenge folks to expand their horizons and try something new and try to level up. So practice and challenge yourself is really the only way to get there.
Yep. And email us or DM us and tell us, what is your dream build or magnum opus build, or the thing that you think about doing that you haven't done yet build? Because I'd kind of like to hear what everybody else's is.
All right, Dave. Well, it's time for the Benchtop Halftime Report, sponsored by Tackett Z. Tackett Z, the must-have tools for the model maker. You can check out what Ed's got going on at www.tacketz.com. And again, I've been using those alligator clips like a fiend lately.
Oh, me too. Me too. They are wonderful.
Simple stuff.
Yep.
Well, Dave, when you're not in the pool, you got to be building, I guess. So what's on your bench?
Well, what's quote unquote rocketed off my bench was the Bronco DF-1, the Dongfeng 1, which was the Communist Chinese first ballistic missile, which was simply a copy of the Russian SS-2 sibling short-range ballistic missile, which was simply an expanded version or a lengthened version of German V2. We picked up our German scientists, they picked up their German scientists, and we both got a rocket program out of them. This kit is a kit that I started 3.5 weeks ago because I needed something to build at our club's Friday night fight quarterly build meeting, where we all sit around for 4 or 5 hours on a Thursday evening. And instead of having a regular meeting, we sit around with building mats and lights and work together on something so everybody can see what else everybody's working on. You can walk around. There's the real advantage of that is that you can watch other people. You can share techniques in real time. Building with other people is a great way to learn modeling. But since I didn't have anything that I was currently working on that I could really transport, I pulled this kit out of the stack because I want to eventually build all of the Soviet/Russian ballistic missiles. So I pulled this kit out, and it's a really nice kit. It's relatively simple to build. And once I started it at the Friday night fight, it just took off to the point where when you and I are done recording this, it's probably, it's going to get its final post-decal gloss coat, a very light wash, and then a final satin coat, and this sucker's going to be done. So it'll be done probably by the time everybody hears this episode, which will put me 2 in for the year, followed very quickly by the 144 scale B-52, which is in war paint. It just needs decals and the finishing touches. So I am going to, by the time we leave for Omaha, I'm going to have both the SS2 and the B-52 that I'm going to take to Omaha. I may take something else as well, but I'll have at least 2 of kits that I've built in this calendar year to take to Omaha. How about you?
Well, John Bonanni will be happy the ZIS-2 base is picking up steam.
Yes, he's starting to grow impatient.
Well, most of the details are now painted up, and most of them are attached to the base. I've got to get the final weathering on the gun finished, which that's going to be a little bit of an unanticipated challenge. We'll get to that in a minute. Man, I've been almost undone by a pair of 135th scale Mosin Nagant rifles.
Well, those looked beautiful. I mean, they really, the pictures you were texting me, they really looked like they were coming out nice.
Well, almost undone. I've prevailed, I think. Once I get them painted, they're only things that haven't been painted yet.
What is the challenge with them, or what was the challenge?
Well, I'm building this thing as like it was photographed, abandoned after the battle had moved on somewhere else, right? And then the crew had abandoned the gun.
Yeah.
So I've got some abandoned equipment, and I wanted a pair of rifles, but to kind of make them look like things got them out a little dodgy right there in the emplacement.
Yeah.
I wanted to have one of the rifles with the bayonet attached to it still.
Mm-hmm.
And the mini art, well, let me back up. I looked at all the Mosin Nagant rifles I had. You know, I've got the mini art small arms kit. I've got some master box sets that have Mosin Nagant rifles in them. And I've got a I've got a Dragon Gen 2 set of Soviet infantrymen that has some in it as well. Well, of all of those, the master box ones have the bayonets already molded on them, but the detail's clunky. And it wasn't a rifle I wanted to use. The Dragon ones are the worst of all. They've got, in that Gen 2 set, they've got a lot of detail on them, but they're not shaped right. They imagine if you cut a rifle stock out of a 2x8 and didn't round any of the edges off. It's just a plank shaped like a rifle, right? That's what they look like to my eyes. The mini art ones are absolutely beautiful. But to put the bayonets on them, which are separate pieces, you have to cut most of the muzzle off of it and leave just a little bit left for a little nub there. And the thing is, the socket of the bayonet is supposed to fit over that nub, and it replaces the front sight as you do that because you cut all that off.
Right.
But it won't fit. It won't fit because the hole in the back of the bayonet is too small for the muzzle that's left on the rifle. I mean, you can enlarge that, I guess, but this thing's tiny, right? I mean, it's just not much there to work with. And the socket on the bayonets, the diameter is too big, and it hits the cleaning rod under the barrel. So I ruined one trying to do that. And then all of the bayonets in the set are fouled by a knit line. Do you know what a knit line is, Dave?
A knit line?
Yes, K-N-I-T, knit line.
No.
A knit line is an injection mold phenomenon where you have two flows of resin coming together in the cavity from
You mean plastic?
Plastic. Well, plastic is resin.
Okay.
It's industry talk, Dave.
I know.
So you have two flow fronts of plastic coming at each other head on.
Gotcha.
So imagine a part that's fed by two gates along the sides, and that material comes into the cavity and hits the opposite wall of the cavity, and it turns left and right.
Yeah. So
on the right side, it's it's moving left. On the left side, it's moving right, and it's filling that mold cavity. And those two plastic flows come together somewhere in the middle between the two gates. Well, if the plastic's not the right temperature or the injection pressure is not right, a whole host of other nuanced things I don't understand fully. Those two flow fronts won't meld together properly. So sometimes it's called a weld line as well.
Gotcha.
And if everything's right, that plastic will flow together and intermix, and there won't be anything there. It'll just be plastic.
Right.
But if things aren't right, those two flow fronts will touch each other and they'll stick, but they won't flow together.
So you get a line.
You get a line. Best case is like you would get best case would be a knit line in a non-functional, non-visible area, and you wouldn't give her a rip about it. On a cosmetic part, you'll see a line like swooping through the cover of a TV or a printer or something.
Right.
Mechanically, it's a weak point, and it'll break there. And every one of these bayonets had a knit line right in the middle. And by the time I broke the third one, I was like, okay, well, they're not going to have bayonets on them anymore.
By the way, that is, for all the listeners, that's actually a good lesson to learn. At some point, it's okay to say, you know what, I'm going to change the plan because this ain't working, or this is too frustrating, or if I keep this up, I'm not ever going to finish this.
Right.
Sometimes it's okay to call an audible.
Then I've been working on the rifle slings. That's the other slow boat. But, I've mentioned before on this podcast, those Soviet slings are not like most others. And they give a real characteristic look to the rifle. So I've been trying to replicate those as best I can. So the main part of the sling I've made out of paper with a photo etch buckle. And then the little dog collar attachments to the rifle I've made out of 5,000 styrene, so I can actually glue them to the gun.
Yeah.
And first one came out great. And I got to get the second one built. And once I get those painted, the finish line's in sight. I'm going to add all the details and the gun once its final weathering's done to the base, everything but the spent shells and the live ammo, because I'm going to have to touch up with a flat coat in some areas. And then once that's done, add the ammos and the empties, and it's done. So I'm real close. And I've put a lot of work in over the last week since now that all the graduation stuff settled down. So it's going to get done.
Well, it sounds like you're making progress, and I know from the pictures I've seen, you have been.
Oh yeah, I got the gas mask and bag got done and painted. I really like the way that came out. So
yep,
keep forging ahead, man. I'll get there.
You will get there. We'll both get there by Omaha.
That's right. It'll be done for Omaha.
Yeah,
it's going to be there.
Instead of talking about what has broken our wallet, considering that we're coming up on the Nationals, and if you're anything like me, you kind of cut back on your current modeling spending, kind of trying to bankroll for the spending you're going to do at the world's largest traveling hobby shop, aka the National. So instead of what broke your wallet, why don't we talk about what's going to break your wallet? What are you planning on buying at the Nationals? Do you have a list? Or, I know different people do this differently. Do you actually have a list of what you're planning to try and acquire?
Yeah, I do, with the caveat of if none of this is there, I surely won't come home empty-handed anyway.
True enough. I've yet to come home from a Nationals empty-handed, except in the awards department.
Yeah, all the stuff you didn't know you needed.
Exactly.
Well, if you've got a list, we can do the back and forth, my friend.
I've got a list of a few things, but I was going to say up front, while I usually do have a list of some stuff that I'm looking for, what amazes me is that most of the stuff that I come back from the Nationals with is stuff I didn't know I needed. I'll go there, and that is the advantage, with the internet, you can find anything these days, etc. But there's something about being in a room with a couple of hundred vendors and going from table to table and seeing things and going, man, I didn't know that was out there. Or, oh, so that's what that's like. And you look at it and you decide, oh yeah, I need that. So a lot of times I come home from the Nationals with a lot of stuff I truly needed, but I had no clue I needed when I went to the Nationals.
Well, I'll start with my first one.
All right.
I'm hoping that TACOM Scharnhorst B turret and 72nd scale will be on somebody's table by the time the Nats rolls around. The Chinese sellers are starting to show them on eBay now, so I gotta think maybe. So this will get. The plan is the reason I want this is to actually create the aft turret with it.
Right.
And the Arado 196 and catapult on the aft turret is a project I want to do. So collecting stuff for that. I've even got the model collect turret, but if I can find this one, that one will go back on eBay probably.
I'm sure.
What you got first?
Well, first and foremost is the DOSWorks U9, which, when the kit was announced, I was gaga for. I have seen numerous build videos of it. I'm still wildly interested, but our local shop never got the kit in, and buying something that big and having it shipped and all is kind of a pain in the butt. So I am hoping that one or more vendors at Omaha will actually have it. There was a vendor who had it in Las Vegas, and I would have bought it, but there was just no way I could figure out to get the thing home on the airplane without buying it a seat. So I didn't ultimately passed up on it. But since we're driving to Omaha, that sucker will fit in the rental vehicle. So I'm looking for the U9, and I'm hoping I'm going to acquire one.
Well, my next one is either Fine Molds F4D or E Phantom, U.S. Air Force, the Vietnam birds.
Yep.
It's got to be the best kit out there at present.
Yep. And you have me to thank by all those years ago building that right. Kit bash.
Well, this is like round 2 of Phantom kits, right?
Oh, this is like round 3.
It's a big plane. It's still a nice size model in that scale.
Yes, it is.
And it kind of harkens back to my nostalgic memory of my Revell F4E and the old Lightning Storm box.
Oh God, I remember that one
that I built as a kid on my grandparents' kitchen table. So
yep.
Yeah. I actually bought one of those again and had at it and was like, this is terrible.
No need to put yourself through that.
You got another one?
Although I've got to say, you just reminded me that I need to pick up a Fine Molds CD Phantom because I want to do the Michigan Air National Guard markings. And they do that kit with those markings included. So you added to my list. Thank you very much. But my next one is thank you. This one's actually courtesy of Jim Bates, the Vargas TB2. Vargas is the resin 3D printed manufacturer of all those World War I pieces and between the war tanks and stuff like that they're doing as 3D printed items. Well, they just announced the TB2 drone, the Bakhtiar drone that's being used a lot in the Ukraine. And since I'm hoping the kit's going to be out by the time of the convention, and if so, that's on my list to pick up.
Well, this one's kind of general. John Wojtek, Unique Master Models, UMM,
yes,
USA.
UMM, yeah.
Subscribers, a punch set, assembly jig, something. He hasn't done a show in our region in a long time. He's not been at anything we've been at.
Yeah, that's true.
Since Indy 2020. It's the last time we saw him.
Right before the pandemic.
That's right. And if the vendor room layout holds, he's got a lot of tables.
Yes, he's got lots of great stuff.
I think it looks like he's bringing everything but the kitchen sink. I mean,
yep.
Because he also tools is one thing. But he's also got some obscure kit lines.
Yes,
from Eastern Europe and places that is kind of cool. So I don't know. I got a feeling it's hard to get on his site sometimes unless you know exactly what you want to pick some of that stuff. He didn't have like even one series of punch and die sets. He's got 2, 3, or 4.
Yes.
And it's really nice to be able to look at it and hold it and pick and choose. So I look forward to getting over to his tables, plural, and see if I can't find me something cool.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned those scribers because I'm sitting here, recording in my model room. I look down. I've got all three versions of his scribers, UMM, SCR 01, 02, and 03, and I use them all. So I highly recommend those. So yeah, and he has lots of great tools that you're right. It really, you need to sit and look at them and examine what he's got before you decide, oh, yeah, this would be useful to me, or this would be useful to me. So I mean, rarely is he present at a model show where I don't spend some money with him.
Well, get ready.
Yeah, I know. I'm buckled down already.
You got a final one?
Yeah, I got a final one. And this is, again, related kind of to Ukraine. I'd like to pick up a kit of the Zvezda kit of the Ka-52, the helicopter that's being used over by the Russians and getting shot down by the Ukrainians. And there's a lot of neat photos of markings, and there's diorama possibilities with several of them that have been shot down and crashed or crash landed. I've looked at these things on eBay, and frankly, in fact, I even ordered one, but it turned out the guy didn't have it by the time I ordered it. With Zvezda stuff, finding it with a retailer right now is kind of hard. So I am hoping with all of the folks vending, that are especially the ones who are vending secondhand items, that I'm going to be able to find and pick up a Ka-52.
Well, I got a couple here left. One of them is
Well, that was my last one, so you go ahead.
If the aforementioned is a bust, and somebody has that 4A model Schnellboat in 72nd scale.
Yeah, that's another one that I need to add to my list, because I've looked at it on eBay, and I'm hoping that I can pick it up a little cheaper at the show.
Yeah, it was announced at Vegas by the distributor. Now there's a lot of info out there online. Looks super, man. And
it does. It looks fantastic.
Now these 72nd scale patrol boats, it's either shaping up for a stash collection or a future rabbit hole for me.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I hear you.
They're cool. It's a good scale for that size of boat, I think.
Yeah.
And finally, either 72nd scale or 76th scale, I want to pick up some piece of nostalgia, I think.
Airfix?
Another Airfix, or possibly even a Matchbox of some type.
Oh my!
To dabble with a little nostalgia build.
That will be interesting. I'm constantly admonishing Jim because he sees these kits, these old Airfix and Matchbox kits, and I think they remind him of his modeling childhood, and so he picks them up, and then they're much better kits of the same thing out there. So
there are, yes.
Yeah, so he doesn't build them, and I'm like, why are you doing this to yourself? Or he'll start them and not finish them because he realizes what a crappy kit they are. But I'll be interested to see what you locate and pick out in that category, because there's some real interesting offerings out there.
There are, yes.
So I can't wait. That ought to be real interesting. So we're getting toward the end of the episode, Mike. How's your modeling fluid?
Well, the second one's gone, so pretty good.
You're revealing our secrets, that it sometimes takes two modeling fluids to get through an episode.
Sometimes.
This
is a solid IPA. It's pretty hoppy, I think. But
it is.
And it's hazy. They don't.
Yeah, they're not lying.
That it's completely
unfiltered.
Unfiltered, yeah. And there's a few floaties in there every now and then too. So
yeah,
it's got a lot of flavor.
It is not my favorite Three Floyds product, but it is certainly one that I would not turn down. I mean, it is very, very drinkable in my opinion.
And I really like these IPAs pretty cold. So
yes,
that's my opinion. What about yours, man?
Well, again, the Canadians know their beer. This Sleeman It was extremely drinkable. It's clearly better than a mass market USA beer. You know, it's better than your standard Coors, Bud, et cetera, et cetera. It's comparable to any craft brew lager or ale type. I got news for you. I'm going to enjoy the rest of them. And if you don't get down here to pick up your six, they might get drunk. So you need to get down here to the pool sometime.
I'll keep that in mind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Mike, you got any shout outs?
I've got a couple. The first one is our normal one. I'd like to shout out those who have chosen to support Plastic Model Mojo financially. Since the last episode, this is Mr. Alex Taylor and Christopher Church. Thank you, guys. And if folks out there feel moved to do the same as they have, you can do so one of two ways. You can go to www.patreon.com/plasticmodelmojo. At Patreon, you can manage a recurring contribution from amount of $1 on up to whatever you choose. And their system will draw that from your payment source every month and keep the recurring contribution going. If you want to make a one-time contribution or manage your own recurring contribution, you can do that by going to www.plasticmodelmojo.com and use the heart icon in the upper right-hand corner. That takes you directly to our PayPal link, and there you can make any kind of contribution you'd like. And we really appreciate it. It's going to go a long way to getting us down the road with future episodes. Can't thank you folks enough. It's just humbling to see that coming in all the time. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I agree. My shout out this episode is to our friends down under, the crew at On the Bench, Dave, Ian, and Julian. They're about to get on an airplane for a long, long time to get to come see us in Omaha. Their last episode, if you haven't listened to it, you should go listen to it. It's on the model contest that they were going to in Melbourne. And it's interesting to listen to them talk about the contest in Australia. And I'll be interested when we get to Omaha and we get to sit there and share some time with them to discuss with them what the differences are in the contests. I know folks from the U.S. who've gone over to England or to Europe talk about some of the big differences they see at the big contests compared to what an IPMS National is like. And I think ours are more, the Australian shows are more like our shows. But I really can't wait to spend some time with those guys and kind of pick their brains about what they see as the similarities and the differences. So my shout out is the OTB guys. 38 days. Can't wait to see you all. Hope to see you all and maybe, just maybe, share a beer or two.
Well, my next one goes to a past Plastic Model Mojo guest, Stephen Reed. He's one of the moderators over at the Facebook T34 interest group and T34 modeling group. Counter to John Bonani, based on some of my recent posts, he gave me a few props and said, folks rushing me to get this done, just need to chill and back off, basically, because of the amount of work I'm putting into each component on it. But the project is closing, this sojourn of mine of the ZIS 2. I do appreciate the kind words. And just in fact, this came in tonight, right before we record this episode. So, Stephen, what if he's going to be at Nats? I don't know. Maybe.
You have to ask him.
I will, or he can chime in after he hears this. So, Steve, thanks. I'm almost done. It's going to get there, but I appreciate the recognition for what I was trying to accomplish there. We'll see if I get there in the end, but it will get finished.
Well, that's awesome. So, Mike, I think we're at the end of the episode.
We are at the end of this episode, Dave, and as we always say, so many kits,
so little time. See you soon, Mike.
All right, man. Well, don't drown your own swimming pool.
I will. You too.
All right. Take it easy.